right. Thank you for your overwhelming attendance. Those of you who are here. All right, good morning, good afternoon rather. Today, the UN, in collaboration with hundreds of non-governmental organizations, presented its 2020 Global Humanitarian Overview. Around the world, it's estimated that a record 168 million people will need humanitarian assistance and protection next year. According to the overview, 1 in every 45 people on the planet is in need of food, shelter, health care, emergency education, protection, or other basic assistance in crises spanning 53 countries from Afghanistan to Zambia. The UN and its partners are planning to provide assistance to 109 million of them and will require nearly $29 billion to do so. In a video message for the launch of the overview, the Secretary General reiterated that conflict, record levels of displacement, and the accelerating climate crisis are pushing the number of people in need higher every year. According to OCHA, the number of people in need of assistance has increased by 22 million people over the past year. As for the funding gap continues to widen, the Secretary General urged donors to help UN and its partners meet the humanitarian challenges that lie ahead. The Global Humanitarian Overview is available online. Staying on the humanitarian issue, yesterday UNICEF released $4.2 billion to 2020 emergency appeal to reach 59 million children with life-saving support in 64 countries around the globe. This is the agency's biggest request of donors yet, representing 3.5 times the funds requested in 2010. UNICEF's Humanitarian Action for Children sets out the agency's 2020 appeal for its work to provide conflict and disaster-affected children with access to water, sanitation, nutrition, education, and health and protection services. Overall, including adults, the appeal covers emergency support for 95 million people. And from Afghanistan today, in a tweet, the UN mission condemned today's killing of respected Japanese aid worker Dr. Tetsu Nakamura. That took place in Jalalabad. 4 Afghan nationals were also killed in the attack, which the UN mission called a senseless act of violence against a man who dedicated much of his life to helping the most vulnerable Afghans. Our OCHA colleagues also expressed its revulsion at the attack, stressing that the humanitarian community in Afghanistan is working tirelessly to assist those in need. As you'll recall, a staff member with UN Development Program was killed late last month in Kabul. The head of the UN mission, Tadamichi Yamamoto, met on Monday with Afghan security agencies chaired by President Ashraf Ghani on last week's attack. Afghanistan security chiefs briefed on the state of their investigations, and both sides emphasized their determination to bring the perpetrators to account and discuss measures to enhance the safety and security of UN personnel. Yesterday afternoon, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the head of the UN, the Department of Peace Operations, briefed troop and police contributing countries on his visit to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mr. Lacroix was in the country over the weekend to follow up on violent protests in the country's northeast, including against the UN peacekeepers. The crisis in the Beni area has severely hampered the UN's ability to carry out its work. In his briefing, Mr. Lacroix stressed that UN peacekeeping mission is working with the Congolese authorities to diffuse tensions and to improve cooperation with the country's army and police. The mission has reinforced the Boikene camp, targeted by protesters last week, and deployed a quick reaction force to secure the OCHA Beni axis. Working with the Congolese armed forces and the Congolese police, the peacekeeping mission is conducting patrols day and night to prevent further attacks against the population as well as Ebola responders. Mr. Lacroix emphasized that the protection of civilians and security situation in the Beni area remain a major source of concern for the UN. To this end, Lieutenant General Carlos Alberto dos Santos Cruz of Brazil, a former force commander of the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC, has been appointed to assess the ability of the peacekeeping force to effectively deliver its mandate to protect civilians and to neutralize armed groups in the Beni territory, to identify operational deficiencies and gaps in these respects, and to make practical recommendations to enhance the force's performance. Also, staying on the DRC, you saw that yesterday afternoon we announced the appointment of Lieutenant General Ricardo Augusto Ferreira Costa Nieves of Brazil as the new force commander for MONUSCO. He succeeds Lieutenant General Filho of Brazil, who completed his assignment in October of this year. And we also appointed 8 members of the Secretary General's high-level panel on internal displacement, as well as an expert advisory group to help guide the panel. And the panel will be chaired by Federica Mogherini, the former High Representative for the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. That appointment was also issued last night. And back here, the Security Council this morning passed a resolution on piracy off the coast of Somalia and is now in close consultations on Syria. And on Syria, our humanitarian colleagues remain deeply concerned for the safety and protection of more than 4 million civilians in the northwest of Syria following continued upsurge in violence and hostilities in the area. More than half of these people are internally displaced. In the past few days, dozens of communities have been impacted by airstrikes, artillery shelling, resulting in death and displacement. Reports indicate that at least 10 people were killed following an airstrike on a local market town in Maharat in Idlib Governorate, and at least 9 people were killed following artillery shelling in Tal Rifat in northern rural Aleppo Governorate. UN Human Rights Office has also documented that 1,000 people were killed between April and August, and an estimated 400,000 people were displaced. The UN calls on all parties to the conflict to de-escalate the situation in the northwest. The UN also continues to remind all parties of their obligations to protect civilians under international humanitarian law, including to follow the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precautions in the conduct of military activities. And WHO says that more pregnant women and children were protected last year from malaria, but accelerated efforts on funding are needed to reinvigorate the global response. According to the World Health Organization, malaria afflicted 228 million people and killed an estimated 405,000, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. More information online. And just in a climate item from Madrid, the World Tourism Organization says that transport-related emissions from tourism are expected to account for 5.3% of all man-made CO2 emissions by 2030, and that's up from 5% in 2016. According to a new report from the organization, jointly done also with the International Transport Forum, as tourist numbers rise and the sector makes progress in achieving low-carbon travel, emissions per passenger kilometer are expected to decline over the coming decade. Against this backdrop, the WTO calls for enhanced cooperation between transport and tourism sectors to effectively transform tourism for climate action. Tomorrow, Rima Baza, the spokeswoman for the President General Assembly, will be here to brief you. And then after my briefing, I will be joined by the High Representative for Least Developed, Landlocked, and Small Island States, as well as the Deputy Permanent Representative of Paraguay, who is also the chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries of the UN. They will be here to brief you on midterm review of the Vienna Program of Action on Landlocked Developing Countries. And we are delighted to announce that Burundi has now paid its budget dues in full, making it the 139th member state to do so. That leaves 44 member states to pay in full. Voila. I leave you in cold silence. Perfect. See you tomorrow. Not this month. Not this month. Exactly. Not this year, indeed. All right. Cheers.